Hey guys, thank you for checking out the video. Please don't forget to check out the card in the video for my other narrations, as well as the end screen video. Now, sit back, close your eyes, and lose yourself in the story. Enjoy. Something Else by Juliet. Okay, so I'm not going to start with one of those disclaimers where the writer assures you that what you're reading is true. It really doesn't matter if you believe this. No one does. I just want to write it down before I convince myself that it isn't real, in case there's someone out there who will take me seriously. I started college this fall, at a university a couple states away from where my parents live, and it went pretty much how it does for most people, I think. I missed my old friends, and even my parents after a while, but I settled in quickly and focused hard on my classes. I have two older brothers. One is a lawyer, and the other in law school. Both were top of all of their classes in college, and earned enough scholarship money that they practically put themselves through school. As the youngest, and as the only sister, I've always had high standards to live up to, and I would be damned if I was going to be the one sibling that was just average. So, I got a job on campus to save up for grad school, and I committed myself to getting straight A's. So, as you can imagine, I didn't sleep much. I got used to pulling all-nighters on essays and lab reports at least once a week. My roommate got used to waking up at 5:30. She worked the opening shift at a cafe near campus, to see me staring blearily at my laptop, putting the finishing touches on some assignment or another in my clothes from the day before. Now, my staying up all night wasn't too much of a problem for my roommate. She kept the lights on at night anyway. Our dorm was supposedly haunted, and a lot of the girls got freaked out at night. Some guy, an upperclassman, told me about it at some party during my first couple of weeks here. "Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that. Some girl who lived there killed herself in the showers last year," he explained. "Like, took the blades out of a disposable razor and cut herself up. And not just her wrists. I heard she sliced herself open all the way up her arms and legs. Massive fucking gashes from her thighs to her feet. I heard there was an inch of blood covering the whole shower room floor, but they never found the blades she used." At this point, his drunk friend chimed in. "Yeah, that's 'cause her fucking ghost has him. So make sure you don't see her while you're in the shower, or she'll chop you the fuck up." I didn't make much of it. For one thing, the more sober one kept trying to put his hand on my leg, and I had a feeling he was hoping I would be so scared that I wouldn't want to sleep in my dorm that night and decide to follow him to his. For another thing, the blades in a disposable razor are sharp, but they're pretty small. I was fairly sure they couldn't get that much blood out of someone. And if that part was bullshit, then the chances were most of it was. I knew the basis was real though. The suicide, that is. A bunch of my floor mates pestered our RA into telling us what happened, since she had lived in the same building the year before. The kid who found the body had dropped out, understandably traumatized, and the school officials didn't tell the students many details. So what she was able to tell us was this: there was a suicide, it was in the shower room, and there was definitely blood. Though I still didn't buy that there was a whole inch. Either way, the dorm staff decided not to house anybody on the third floor, where the suicide had happened after that year, so the third floor shower room was always still and dark and empty. People would get dared to spend a night in there, or try to do shit with the Ouija boards, but no one was dumb enough to try actually showering in there. Except for me. But, to my credit, it wasn't some stupid dare. It was finals week of my second semester, and I was even busier with schoolwork than usual. Luckily, the next day was the last day of the school year, and all I had to do was turn in an essay for one class. I had stayed up all night to finish it, and only gotten a couple hours of sleep that night. And because caffeine can only get you through so much, it was getting hard to stay awake. But I needed a good grade on this paper, and a part of me wanted to see how far I could push myself before I mentally collapsed. At one point, I caught myself snoozing at my desk, my chin propped up against my hand, for about the 5th time. I glanced at my alarm clock, then at my laptop screen. It was 5 a.m. That left a good 4 hours until my class started, and all I had to do now was write a few more conclusory sentences and proofread. Well, a short break wouldn't kill me, I decided, and I needed a shower anyway. So I threw on my bathrobe and grabbed a towel and the little basket where I had my shower stuff. I shut the door behind me, quietly, so as not to wake my roommate. She only had half an hour or so before she had to be up for work. When I got to my floor shower room, I was unsurprised to hear one of the showers already running as I shuffled into a stall and hung up my robe. It was finals week after all, and I probably wasn't the only one on my floor who had just pulled an all-nighter. Still rubbing my eyes, I turned the shower knob 3/4 of the way around and was jolted awake as a spray of freezing water hit me head on. I stood there for a few shivery minutes, shifting my weight uncomfortably and waiting for the water to warm up. But it didn't change, even when I turned the knob to the hottest setting. The hot water must have been used up for this floor, I thought, with a half-hearted swell of admiration for my unknown floormate, who was showering anyway in the cold water. I turned my own shower back off, but as I walked out of the stall, shrugging my bathrobe back into place, I noticed that all the shower curtains were open. The shower on the end, empty, was spouting a tepid stream of water onto the floor, so no hot water because someone was stupid enough to leave without turning their shower off. My annoyance fueled my determination to get clean. I adjusted my robe and climbed 1 story up to the 3rd floor, trying not to think too hard about what I was actually doing. Everyone in the dorm had a specific key to their floor, so that we could only get into one shower room. But as I had hoped, the one on the 3rd floor was unlocked. This was a stupid move on campus security's part. I observed as I went inside to see the mirrors smashed and the walls crisscrossed with graffiti. But either way, it benefited me. I was doubtful that this floor would actually have hot water, or even any water at all. But it was worth a try. I went into a stall and hopefully turned the knob toward hot. There was an awful screeching noise from inside the walls, which I chalked up to the moving of rusted and underused pipes. But then, there was a gush of water from the shower head. Surprised, I hurriedly jumped out of my bathrobe and hung it on a hook on the wall, though not quickly enough to keep it from being splattered with the water, which was bitingly cold and orange with rust. As I waited though, the rust color faded out and disappeared down the drain, and the water temperature rose to an almost warmth that was acceptable, if not pleasant. I'm not going to lie, I was creeped out in there. Not terrified, I hadn't believed in ghosts since I was 5, but still, definitely creeped out. There was a smell of something dull and metallic in there, something old and festering. The plumbing in here must have fallen to shit. That's gotta be where the smell is from, I reasoned, though a voice at the back of my mind whispered, blood. I decided to finish my shower as quickly as possible, and then get out of there. I was feeling better though. By the time I finished washing my hair and skin, the weather was finally starting to warm up, and I felt like wearing shorts today. So why not spend an extra few minutes shaving my legs? Anyway, I was almost done with my paper, and my first class of the morning wasn't for another 2 hours. And the only vaguely scary thing that had happened so far was a faint scraping sound coming from the floor drain. Again, I chalked it up to a rusty plumbing. As I was shaving, I started thinking about finals coming up, about how badly I wanted straight A's, and how some of my grades were right on the borderline. I guess not concentrating was what caused me to cut myself. It was just a little nick, and definitely nothing I wasn't used to, but the unexpected twinge of pain made me drop my razor. It skittered across the slippery tiles, and as I bent to pick it up, I noticed something. There was something caught in the drain. It didn't look like a hairball or an earring someone had dropped. It was something else. It was about the size of a small fist, child-sized, and it was pale white, webbed with hair-thin black lines. I thought it might be a marble, or maybe some kind of stone. In a moment of curiosity and what I can only guess was stress-fueled stupidity, I knelt down and started to pry the grate off the drain. I thought the thing was maybe some sort of brooch or necklace that someone had somehow dropped in there. It really was stupid of me. Even as I pried the grate off the open hole of the drain, I could already see the thing inside starting to move. I tossed the grate aside with a feeling of triumph, and saw the pale thing begin to rise up toward me. It seemed to be writhing with a force of its own, and I thought I could see thin protrusions below its surface, almost like bones. With a growing sense of fear roiling in my stomach, I stood up and backed away a couple steps, but my sheer unwillingness to believe in a stupid ghost story kept me rooted to the spot. As the thing reached the top of the drain hole, it somehow unfurled. I don't know how else to describe it. 4 spindly protrusions curled outward from the top of it, revealing a flat underbelly covered with oily, purple sores. One side was sticky with something that looked like grayish pus coming from the end of a knobby stump where there should have been a thumb. I recoiled as I realized that this thing was a hand. The palm wasn't much bigger than a toddler's, but each of the remaining fingers had to be at least 6 inches long, with bulging knuckles, and at the end of each one, a fingernail. Actually, claw might be a better word for them. The one on the little finger was broken off at the base, leaving only a few jagged fragments lodged in a gooey nail bed. But the others added another 3 inches in length to each finger. They hooked inward, grotesquely, and the edges glinted in the rusty water pooling around the drain. They looked razor sharp. Now, by the time it took me to observe all this, I didn't really give a shit anymore about how childish it was to believe in ghost stories, or how this might be my imagination blowing some easily explained thing out of proportion, or even that I was completely naked with one leg still smeared with shaving cream. I was getting out of there. I started to scramble backward. One hand reached out behind me to yank open the shower curtain, but the tiles were slick and I didn't manage to back up more than a couple steps before my ass hit the floor. As I fell, one of my ankles brushed the palm of the hand. It felt clammy and soft, like something left too long at the back of the fridge. The fingers twitched at the contact. I flipped over onto my hands and knees, thinking I could crawl out, but as I tried to shuffle away, I felt the long fingers wrap around my ankle. A jolt of pain went up my leg as I felt the claws bite into me. I looked back to see several inches of arm now outside the drain, and still rising slowly, millimeter by millimeter, out of the floor. I could see the outlines of warped bones and tendons beneath the sagging skin, and the very beginning of a knobby elbow. And at the other end, the hand was still grasping my ankle, trickles of blood dripping down from where the claws pressed into my skin. I tried to pull my leg back toward my body, but the thing's grip only tightened. I felt a sickening scraping sensation, and another bolt of pain as the claws met the bone of my leg, and the screeching noise was back. The arm was still slowly rising out of the drain. It was my roommate that saved me, her and that early cafe shift she hated so much. She said she found it strange when she woke up at dawn to find me gone, and my laptop still on and opened to my almost finished essay, mid-paragraph even. Also absent were my bathrobe and the basket of shampoo and other shower supplies we shared, but she didn't hear any water running in the second floor shower room, so following a hunch, she checked the one on the third floor. The paramedics said that I'd probably been unconscious for 20 minutes or so. I had lost a lot of blood. When they found me, a series of gashes going from my ankle to my hip on my left leg, and up to my knee on the right. Some of the cuts were shallow, but most were deep and jagged. The worst of it was in the area of my left ankle. The doctor spent hours stitching me up. They asked me about my history of illegal drug use and mental illness, and I told them truthfully that I had neither. They asked me if I was sure about 10 times, then had a psychiatrist come talk to me. I was more than a little bit hopped up on pain meds, but even so, it took me a few days to let my guard down enough to ask my psychiatrist about the hand. She said that nothing else out of the ordinary had been in the shower room when they found me. Just me, naked and bleeding on the floor. She said that disturbing hallucinations were a common symptom of sleep deprivation. But then, how did I get all those cuts? I asked. She didn't sugarcoat things, I'll give her that. You did that to yourself, hun. You were stressed and you were tired. And you're not the first college student to become unstable during finals week. Like I said, I'm starting to believe her about the hand being a hallucination, but I know I wasn't the one who gave me those cuts. There wasn't anything sharp enough or big enough to slice me up like that. Not in the showers, not in my room, and nowhere in the vicinity. They thought I might have taken apart my razor, but when I asked my roommate, she said that she saw it lying beside me, exactly where I had dropped it, completely intact. Which is why I want to put this out there for other people to see. I know that what I remember happening makes no sense, and shouldn't be possible, but I just wouldn't feel right staying quiet about it. I want people to know. I don't think that girl killed herself in the shower room last year. I think something else did. College Bathrooms by Claudio F.D. My college is pretty creepy at night. I suppose the same could be said of most sizable public buildings, a byproduct of the eerie contrast between the bustling, well-lit corridors and their nocturnal, desolate appearance. Be that as it may, I would still argue that the building in case goes past the simple dissonant clash of habit, meeting familiar unfamiliarity. The building where I have classes until 10, twice a week, shuts off most lights in the second floor by 8 o'clock, as most classrooms up there are not being used past that time. I suppose this is an opportunity for the personnel to start closing up as soon as possible. In fact, the personnel are so eager to close up that one time our class was actually locked inside the building. We had stayed past our scheduled time trying to get through presentations that were taking far too long, only to find the front door locked. The entire class, professor included, ended up leaving through a low window. That event wasn't scary though, just amusing. What scares me is the unlit second floor. I think it didn't used to feel scary per se, possibly just a bit eerie, but now I can't possibly go there at nighttime. The college's buildings are enormous. It's a really old university, and they took their classical inspirations a little too far. The halls are at least 20 feet high, and one can't help but feel dwarfed by the scale, especially when walking through them while they're empty. It's truly a grand waste of space, but it now just adds to the creepiness of it all. I'm aware of the range of possible explanations for the events that I'm about to recall. Trust me, I've taken shelter under their comforting embrace for far longer than anyone else. Even so, I can't help but feel that spreading my experience might help someone else out there in the future. Class ended early that day. After an entire day of classes, all I wanted to do was head home. But I still had a 45-minute commute, and my and my physiological needs weren't going to wait that long without putting me through severe discomfort. I chose to go to the second floor bathrooms, as I usually did at the time. I'm not particularly fond of public bathrooms, out of hygienic considerations, so choosing the second floor bathrooms that had already been cleaned for the day was a matter of course. The bathrooms in that building have motion sensors. I honestly hate those. There's something truly unpleasant about the lights suddenly going out while you're doing your business. You will then have to wave your arm around until the damn sensor detects movement, or enjoy defecating in the dark, whichever you prefer. It's annoying, especially when you have the need to stay for a bit longer due to an upset stomach. And it was just this type of scenario that day. I went up there, marveled in the usual eeriness of the empty hall, and went in the bathroom. It was empty, as usual. Sitting on the toilet, I allowed myself to sigh deeply and enjoyed the odd catharsis that comes from a moment of rest after a stressful day, mixed with the relief of attending to overdue physiological needs. The lights went out. A few cusses and waves later, they returned. A short time later, they went out again. I stretched my arm and waved, but the lights didn't turn back on. Damn sensors, I thought. I stretched my arm further, and even got slightly up from the toilet, to try to activate the sensor. Reaching up into the darkness, my arm hit something. It couldn't be the wall, my arm was stretched towards the door. And it couldn't be the door either, because the stall was pretty big. Besides this bit of logic, the feeling certainly wasn't that of a door or a wall either. It felt warm and damp, perhaps even slightly slimy. I could also feel rough points in between that felt oddly sharp. The feeling was also shifting around, letting me know that whatever I touched had movement. I felt the slimy warmness wiggle around my arm, as if I had just been licked by it. I staggered backwards and fell beside the toilet, ignoring the pain and reaching frantically for my phone for a light source. The phone was in my jeans pocket, and the panic wasn't letting me retrieve it with as much speed as I wished. I felt something touch my legs, spreading throughout, and screamed. I used my left hand to swipe at it, but it was no use, as the feeling of it enveloping my arm overtook me once more. The phone was finally out, and with the click of a button, light streamed back into the stall. I heard something that I couldn't identify, and I was showered in the light of the bathroom. On the verge of a panic attack, I looked at my arms and saw what looked like a rash stretching from about my wrist to my elbow. They also felt damp. I hurried out of the bathroom as soon as possible, storming to the door to the left of the stall. I bet I looked like a madman, half crying and running for the front door. I'm just thankful I didn't run to anyone I knew. The rash-looking redness that covered my arms disappeared shortly after. Retrospective is a bitch sometimes. I showered myself in excuses and logical explanations to wipe away what I conceived of as an irrational fear. Even so, retrospective keyed me into a rather upsetting detail, something I couldn't possibly have taken into consideration while panicking. The single light bulb that illuminates the stall did not glow uniformly and at once. I started seeing the light from the light bulb from left to right. I have been to that bathroom plenty of times. Those lights come on at once. Whatever I felt in the dark had been covering the light source physically. It stood in its way to keep me in the dark. When I turned on the phone, it fled from left to right, allowing the light that had never been off to shine over the stall. Whatever I felt in the dark was probably still standing in the bathroom to my right. As I exited, it probably watched me as I ran for the door. I don't go to the unlit sections of that campus anymore, and whenever I use the bathroom with light sensors, I make sure to keep my phone at hand. I suggest you do the same. How to Break a Bad Habit by William Dalphin. When I was in college, I developed a bad habit. No, not alcohol or drugs, something far tamer than those. I developed a habit of sleeping in class. You see, it seemed as though every class I had fell right after a meal. Breakfast, then comp sci, lunch, then general biology, dinner, and then statistics. As a result, I tended to drift off as the professors lectured. However, it was an incident that occurred during that last class that finally broke me of the habit for good. Most of my classes were held in the lecture halls at the Science Center, a large, multi-storied, concrete building with little in the way of decor. From the outside, it looked more like a parking garage or a penitentiary than an educational facility. Inside wasn't much better. A drab, featureless interior full of the same bland, concrete walls and dull, fluorescent lighting. Only a small area on the third floor dedicated to offices for the various staff had anything that added color to the place. One evening, after a meal from the student union, I sat in the back row of my statistics course, feeling the tug of my eyelids as the professor droned on, down in the front of the auditorium, and my stomach digested my dinner. You never notice yourself going to sleep unless you're actively fighting it, and I was not one to wage war on myself, so it wasn't long before I was out, chin in my hands, pen dangling from my fingertips, hunched over a notebook full of scribbles. It wasn't unusual for the teacher to notice when someone was snoozing in the middle of a lecture. Half the time, it seemed like they didn't care. They're not paid to wake you up after all. If you're not paying attention, they're not going to suffer a pay cut when you flunk out. But some still take a moment to call your name, and try to snap you out of it. So when I heard my name being called in the middle of sleep's dark embrace, I quickly snapped to attention and responded, "Yes?" My face got really hot, anticipating the laughter of the other students. But the moment quickly faded as I realized I was sitting alone in a dark and empty classroom. Looking at my watch, I realized that I'd actually managed to doze off through the entire hour, and then some. And it was already past 9. Nobody had bothered to wake me, either as a joke or out of sheer obliviousness. Then I sat there wondering, who called my name? I could still hear the voice in my head, leaving me to wonder if maybe it had been a dream. But then the voice came again. It was low, echoing in the empty room, clearly not my imagination. The auditorium was dark, but I could still make out much of the interior, and the empty seats from the smidgen of yellow light that came through one of the exits, especially from my position at the top back row. "Hello?" I called out into the empty blackness. Several steps down and to my left, something shuffled, moving along the row of seats. I couldn't see it, but from the sound of it, it seemed to be coming in my direction. Instinctively, my heart started racing, and I stood up, fumbling in the dark to find my books and get out of there. My pen fell to the floor and rolled off the edge of the level that I was on, and for the briefest moment, I had the insane thought that I needed to go get it. But then the shuffling stopped, and the room went quiet, and I stood frozen in my spot, holding my breath, and feeling my heart beating in my ears. It felt like minutes went by, standing in that uncanny silence. I swear, the only sound seemed to be the faint ticking of my watch. The need to move, to get out of that room, was overwhelming. But some lingering thought in the back of my mind wanted to hear whoever it was, whatever it was, and know that I wasn't going crazy. It obliged, finally breaking the silence by calling out my name again, not with a friendly, curious voice, but one almost devoid of emotion, like a parrot repeating the sounds its owner makes, but not knowing what they mean. When I gave no response, It moved with a brushing noise, akin to someone crawling on their hands and knees, then called again. I couldn't hold my breath any longer, and I exhaled raggedly, my entire body shaking with fear. It was enough, and the shuffling came again, almost frenetic, moving to the middle of the aisle, then up the steps toward where I stood. Finally, my fight or flight response kicked in, and gripping my books tightly under one arm, I dashed for the other end of the row, nearly tripping over my own feet. Looking back over my shoulder, the room was still incredibly dark, but there was enough contrast between the shadows and the objects that I could just make out the form of whatever it was, coming up around the edge of the desks. It had the appearance of a human being, but its gait seemed more like that of a crab, walking on both hands and feet, with its knees and elbows bent, and its back arched at an agonizing-looking angle. Something about its head also seemed off, the way it bobbed as the thing scuttled, like it wasn't fully attached. The nightmare realized that as I was on the move and began scrambling up onto the desktops in a beeline straight for me. As it clambered across the row, it started making this awful gibbering sound with an unnerving excitement to it. I can't adequately describe the noise, but it put the fear of God in me. Any faint notion I had that I was being pranked went right out the window when the thing came at me. I hit the wall hard, bruising my shoulder, and tumbled down the steps toward the end of the room. Through sheer determination, I managed to keep myself on my feet and tore out of that classroom without looking back. Nobody was in the hall. In fact, nobody seemed to be in that part of the building at all. And why would they be? There weren't any classes that late at night, and all the offices and study areas were 2 stories up. The exit to the building was dark, almost as dark as the lecture hall, but I didn't care. I bolted up into the crisp night air, startling several people who were walking past, and didn't stop running until I'd made it back to my dormitory, where I hid in my room with the lights on, door locked, and shades drawn, until my roommate returned. So, what was it? I don't really know. My strongest suspicion is based on a story I learned later while talking about the incident with a grad student who had been studying at the school for years. According to her, when the center was first being built, one of the construction workers paving the roof wasn't watching where he was going and stepped on a skylight that happened to be set over a stairwell. He plunged 3 stories, striking the rail several times and landing on his neck, killing him instantly. Whether that story is true or not, I can't be sure. I couldn't find any news articles about construction accidents, and none of the professors I asked could verify it. Nobody else has described experiencing anything like it either. I'll tell you though, after that, I didn't visit the science center after dark, and I sure as hell never fell asleep in class again. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, check out one of the recommended ones on the screen. Also, if you feel like it, please like, subscribe, and share this video so that I can grow my channel and create even better content for you guys. If you want to stay updated with my latest stuff, check out my socials in the description. My Reddit and Twitter are where you can read the news on my latest work. I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe, and more importantly, keep traveling down the dark path.